Good evening, everyone. Today is Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, and you are joining the Birmingham Board of Education study session. My name is Kim Whitman, and it is my privilege and honor to serve as president of the school board for the 2020-2021 school year. Again, as you will notice, we're calling this a study session. So for the community that has dialed in, thank you for joining us. But what the study session means is that we will be discussing the various topics that were listed in the public agenda. However, we will be conducting no voting this evening. Our next meeting where we will be conducting any sort of meetings will be in 2 weeks, February 23rd, at our regular board meeting. So again, welcome to all of those of you watching us on YouTube. Again, today is Tuesday, February 9th, 2021, and this is the Birmingham Public School Education Study Session. Our first order of business is roll call. So Joan, I will turn it over to you, please.
Thank you, President Whitman. Trustee Angeloni?
Present.
Trustee Hokumer?
Here.
Trustee Joseph?
Here.
Trustee McKinney?
Here.
Trustee Rass?
Here.
Trustee Whitman?
Present.
And Trustee Young?
Here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joan. Allow the minutes to show that all 7 trustees are in attendance for tonight's study session. Our next order of business is public comment. We do have 16 public comments this evening. I would like to say thank you to all of the community members for your input. For those of you, again, watching us on YouTube and wondering why we are on Zoom, given that last week we voted for the students to go back, there was an MDHHS emergency orders that came out last week stating that board meetings had to occur virtually until March 30th, 2021. So to simply by following the law that we are here joining all of you via Zoom. So with that said, as we continue for all of February, March, public comments will be asked to be videoed and submitted to the Dropbox. Again, this evening we have 16 public comments, and so Alan, I will ask you to please let it roll.
Hello, I'm Jack Drinker and I go to Berkshire Middle School and I'm a 6th grader.
I'm Lucy Drinker and I'm a 4th grader at Beverly.
I'm Charlie Drinker and I'm a 4th grader at Beverly.
And I am Amelia Drinker and I am a 3rd grader at Beverly. First, I'd like to give a big thank you to our teachers. They are all rock stars and we love them. My siblings and I all have autoimmune diseases and my youngest sister also has type 1 diabetes. Charlie, Amelia, and I have all been a part of BBA this year. In January, Jack started Berkshire Hybrid and has been enjoying it.
Since I was young, my mental health has always been something I struggle with. Mental health has become a big concern during COVID for all kids. So as a family, we felt that it would be best for me to go to Berkshire with the hybrid model, knowing that BPS was following guidelines and doing all they could to keep me safe as well as teachers. Because of mine and my siblings being more medically vulnerable, my face-to-face school time is taken away. That is not right.
Our parents were hoping to send my siblings and I back to school in March. Knowing that BPS felt it was more important to have social distancing in place. Having type 1 diabetes, I have to have that. I can't go to school without social distancing in place. So because adults think it's okay to not think about kids like me, I don't get the chance to go to school in person.
Hybrid school isn't a perfect solution, but it allows kids like us and all kids to go to school to have some in-person school to be safe, because BPS doesn't want to follow guidelines that have been shown to work. My siblings and I pay the price. We are only 4 kids, but how many other in BPS are in the same situations as us? Education should be free and equal to all.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Erin, and I am a concerned parent of the Birmingham School District. First off, I'd like to talk about consistency. These kids need consistency, especially in the world in which we live. Fortunately, my kids have only had to have 2 teachers this school year, but that is largely due to the fact that we chose BVA to keep consistency for our kids. I have heard from my friends and neighbors and the community at large that some of these kids have had 3, 4, even 5 teachers throughout this school year, which is not fair for them. Secondly is your teachers, your staff, your school communities are pleading with you to not do this. Please listen to them and listen to the CDC and the Michigan Department of Health when they say that 3 feet is not enough room with this airborne virus. 3 feet is definitely not enough. These teachers and these kids need at least 6, possibly more. On a personal note, my son was very excited to do the hybrid starting on March 15th. Due to this new plan of no social distancing, and a lack of a plan as of right now, we will not be sending him, and it makes him happier because he feels as though 3 feet is not enough to keep him or his teachers or his classmates safe. I hope that you reconsider what you are doing and the danger that you are putting this community in. Thank you. Have a great day.
Good morning. My name is Katherine Dobrowitzki. I am the mother of 3 children in Birmingham Public Schools, 1 at Seaholm, 1 at Derby, and 1 at Harlan, who's currently in the BVA. I wanted to submit this public comment today with the hopes that the board will take these comments seriously and take them into consideration as they make further decisions on how to handle the rest of the school year. The first is I want to say that I strongly disagree with a return to full-time face-to-face learning, despite the fact that science shows that it will not be safe. The first is that it's contrary to Governor Whitner's recommendations, which were to encourage a return to in-person school with masks, mitigation strategies, and 6 feet of distancing. The fact that Birmingham, who is traditionally a leader in education, is going to be disregarding CDC and state guidelines, to me, is very troubling and is unacceptable. We live in Birmingham because of the schools. Like many other parents in the district, we have options on where to live and where to raise our family, and we chose Birmingham specifically because its schools are excellent and we highly value education. The fact that this board has made this decision is incredibly disappointing and frankly scary as a parent. We are doing everything we can and making incredible sacrifices to mitigate community risk in our family. And the fact that Birmingham Public Schools is not willing to do the same, to me, is just reckless. Also, this really is not promoting equity. Parents, teachers, families, students have all been working together to mitigate the risks of this virus. And the fact that the board chose to listen to the voices of a few instead of the voices of all is really discouraging and, again, frankly, reckless. The last thing, though, that I wanted to bring to the board's attention in my public comment is one thing that I haven't heard anyone talking about, which is Legionella. Current testing shows really dangerous and high levels of Legionella contamination in the middle schools and the high school, despite the fact that students and teachers are back in the building. I know that those systems were flushed. It appears that the flushes were not successful. And the risks of Legionella are known. The CDC finds that there are no acceptable levels of Legionella that are safe. And the fact that there are high levels in our middle school and our high school, and the board has decided to further endanger the lives of our students and our teachers, is just unacceptable and reckless. There is nothing on the website that talks about what, if anything, the board is going to do about this contamination. And moreover, the legal consequences are clear. We know that criminal charges have been pressed by our Attorney General against those public leaders who failed to act with regard to Legionella and its dangers. So I would expect the board to timely respond to tell us what's going on with Legionella and what are you going to do about it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Katherine, Henna, parent and employee. I want to talk about trust and equity. When the recent return to school resolution was amended from a K-5 to a K-12 motion based on a survey of 87% of just K-5 families, my trust in this board was shaken. I fully understand the rationale that March 15th makes sense to some of you because there will be teacher changes anyway due to a new trimester, and streaming may mitigate the disruption due to quarantines for the 6 to 12 population. But you did not give those voices a chance to be heard, nor have you even evaluated the effectiveness of the current hybrid model that was put into motion by you. You have not even completed the governance cycle on that decision by evaluating before making a new plan. The governor and the CDC want in-person learning that is safe. Neither party demands a full 5-day return, but an in-person return that is safe and includes at the very minimum 3 feet of distancing in the classroom, preferably 6 feet, and requires 6 feet during lunch. I fail to see the equity in this decision. While BVA may be a choice for some students for guaranteed safety, it is no choice for the student who needs some amount of in-person instruction and a high level of safety. The hybrid model provides that equity while we are still in the midst of a pandemic. The very pleasure one trustee has expressed in seeing their student return to the classroom is being withheld from some of our most vulnerable students' families. Your decision may appeal to a vocal group of parents who have bullied you with threats of impeachment and lawsuits, but it lacks the inclusivity of the entire BPS community with all its diverse needs. I want to return to in-person learning, but at the lowest risk possible. I want all our students to have access to quality instruction, students who suffer with depression, students who learn differently, students who have tech access issues, and students who just miss the classroom. But I have yet to hear a solution other than the current hybrid model that comes close to satisfying most of those needs. If you choose to continue, I implore you to get with your in-house experts, the teachers, to evaluate your current model, modify where necessary, and keep the health and safety of all foremost in mind in order to establish equity and rebuild trust in the community. I know this has been hard for our community, and I too have experienced hardship. I have a 9th grader with an IEP who is yet to set foot in C-Home this year. I have a senior last year who missed all the spring milestones and was not able to celebrate his graduation in the way we all imagine, surrounded by friends and family. Both my college kids have had virtual-only classes, and my eldest son lost a friend to suicide this fall. So I get the toll and the loss, but I'm not willing to prioritize one health and safety issue over another. Mental and physical health need equal attention, and at present, I do not see how the March 15th plan adequately addresses both. Thank you for your time.
Hi, I'm Katy Pierce. I have 2 elementary age children in the district. After last week's board meeting, I feel like it's important to share with the board and the community what a great job I think our teachers are doing. Since the beginning of the pandemic, they truly have been going above and beyond, at least from my perspective, and I have a few examples. I haven't gotten permission from them to share their names, so I'll just give the examples, but I'm sure this is happening across the district. I'd like to start with my younger son's kindergarten teacher and her parapro. They came to our house in separate cars back in May to check in on my son and visit. They stood on the yard, he stood on the porch, but they shared conversation, talked about how things were going, made sure that everything was going okay, and just seeing her come in person and seeing a big smile on my son's face made me realize that was really a special thing that she did, and she really went above and beyond. Next, I'd like to recognize the homeroom teachers and the math teachers and the Spanish teachers at Covington. When we made the switch from Google Classroom to Schoology, it was rocky, like for me as a parent. My son actually was much more adept at picking it up, but I had so many questions, and I think I emailed the teachers about 50 times, and 50 times they emailed me back patiently, professionally, courteously, answered all my questions. They were amazing. They had much more grace and patience through the transition than I did, and I applaud them for that. Next, I'd like to recognize the teacher at Covington that set up the outdoor geocaching club back early on in the fall, before hybrid was even an option for the students. He set up this way for kids to socially distance outdoors and participate in an after-school club. So after a long day on Zoom, this gave my son a great opportunity to get outside and see some friendly faces and just go do something. And I applaud that teacher for being creative and taking the time to set that up. Finally, I want to give a huge shout out to my son's first grade BVA gym class teacher. I can't imagine teaching gym class over Zoom to 25 first graders, but time after time, he does it successfully. He gets them up out of their chairs and jumping and moving around, building obstacle courses, and they're energetic and engaged. So hats off to all of our Zoom gym teachers. Like I said, I think the teachers across the district are doing a great job in handling this pandemic very professionally. Whenever teachers come to me, I do my best as a parent to listen, and I respect them, as I said. And so I ask the board that you listen to our teachers and respect them as well. Thank you.
My name is Rosemary Weatherston, and I'm a graduate of the Birmingham School District, and I have 2 children attending middle school and high school in BPS. I'm commenting on the mandate for K through 12 students to return to full days of in-person instruction by March 15th. Now, we're only allowed to have 3 minutes to comment. It's not enough time for me to summarize the scientific evidence regarding how dangerous this high-density, high-exposure plan will be, nor to revisit the concerns so many teachers expressed about the plan's pedagogical problems last week. So instead, I'm going to try and meet board members on the goals that we seem to share in common: a deep dedication to the well-being of our children and to the future successes of Birmingham School District. This current plan jeopardizes both those goals. First, in addition to general safety and pedagogical issues, the K through 12 plan is conflating completely different populations of students with different modes of instructions and different contagion issues. At a bare minimum, any decision to move to in-person learning has got to consider K through 12 and middle school, high school, kindergarten through 5th grade teachers and students separately. Moreover, the decision has created this type of false choice between keeping the current hybrid model exactly as it is and a full return to face-to-face instruction with a merely supplemental online option. There may be ways to make different accommodations within the hybrid model to help the students and families who are struggling the most. At last week's board meeting, you reviewed the plans for an equity and inclusion audit, with equity defined not as the same solution for every person, but something that adapts to the needs of individuals. Adaptations within this hybrid model should be explored before it's jettisoned. And second, the board's decision to pursue this course of action against the pedagogy and safety concerns of teachers and parents and in violation of prior written agreements is going to do long-term damage to the district. We are already in the middle of a teacher shortage that's predicted to continue for years. And excellent teachers, especially those who could contribute to increased equity and inclusion in our district, are going to be in high demand. You can bet that as they evaluate different job offers, they will look to see how districts responded to the pandemic and how they treated faculty, staff, and children. And if a good candidate learns that this district violated its agreements, disregarded our teachers' expertise, and on the most basic human level, dismissed their pleas to let them at least get vaccinated before opening up the schools, that candidate is no doubt going to look elsewhere. At this point in the pandemic, we cannot and we don't need to make a choice between the needs of students, teachers, and parents. I urge the board to reconsider the decision to mandate a K through 12 return to school by March 15th. Thank you.
Board of Education and Central Leadership Team. When you voted to go back full-time and minimize safety protocols, you shifted the equity balance in our district. Many families who would like to begin hybrid, as well as those currently in hybrid, now say they no longer feel safe doing so and will be switching to virtual. You've essentially removed the opportunity for us to have any face-to-face learning with safe mitigation practices. Additionally, while you say every effort will be made to keep current homeroom teachers, the recent past showed us you were not able to do so, and the majority of kids did in fact have a teacher change. Your recent survey asked people to rank the importance of safety measures, but safety measures are cumulative and meant to stack to be most effective. By removing 6 feet distancing, you've also made other safety measures less effective. At the beginning of the pandemic, the board and central leadership stated that we were going above and beyond CDC recommended protocols. Why is it now okay to go below the CDC's recommended protocols? The lack of clarity in the survey about decreasing social distancing to less than 3 feet has resulted in a false picture of what the majority of stakeholders truly want. I would urge you to resurvey stakeholders, teachers, and staff with a transparent line of questioning. The State of Michigan guidelines for opening schools safely recommends 6 feet of distance at all times. It further states that if 6 feet cannot be maintained for a full-time in-person approach, schools should consider reducing student density. This may include a hybrid schedule to allow 6 feet of distancing and having in-person for at least half time. This is what we currently have. The document continues, if a school district nonetheless proceeds with in-person learning, it should maintain a minimum seated distance of 3 feet in classrooms and consider installing partitions. So you're telling us that Birmingham Public Schools can no longer provide us even the minimum standard? Vaccinations. Although the CDC director stated that vaccinating all teachers prior to school return is not necessary, she also indicated that this was only true with a strict use of mitigation strategies, including mask wearing, frequent and rapid COVID testing, hand washing, sanitation, and 6 feet of social distancing. She did not say to pick and choose which strategy you would like to use. Asking our educators to teach in person without the assurance of a vaccine, but also without these basic safety guidelines, is not acceptable. Also not acceptable is haphazardly adding middle and high school to the resolution and voting on it before surveying the teachers and families impacted by that decision. This has conveyed the message to our educators that they are inconsequential and to our families that their opinions simply do not matter.
Last week, Dr. Roberson communicated that there are limited replacement educators from which to choose. With only 30% of teachers indicating they feel comfortable going back face-to-face, how do you plan to fill the spots of the educators who will now be taking leave of absence or early retirement? According to Dr. Walensky, the CDC director, federal guidance on how to reopen schools safely for both students and teachers will be released this week, with an emphasis on prioritizing teacher vaccinations as well as a push for rapid COVID testing within the schools. This information would help to ensure our success, comfort, and safety. Experts report that the UK COVID variant, which is already present in our state, not only spreads more easily, but also possibly has a higher death rate. The current vaccine will provide some immunity from this variant, however, how much is still unknown. Experts also agree that now is not the time for us to be letting down our guard. Wouldn't it be more prudent to spend this time planning a robust and safe, strong plan for the fall instead of rushing for what amounts to only 3 months? Take this time to research renting trailers, heated tents, and explore ways to provide safe and exemplary full-time face-to-face education for all of our students. This choice that you've made is causing stress and anxiety to your staff and stakeholders. By waiting for federal guidance, you can show our teachers that you do value them and also allow them to be fully vaccinated, while letting the students and families take a breath and exhale with some much-needed stability. With the rollout of the vaccine, we are so close to being able to feel comfortable again. We ask you to please reconsider the risk-reward ratio based on accurate numbers following a more transparent survey. Our teachers are the ones who know our children's learning styles, the curriculum, and how to adapt to their individual needs, yet they have not been asked how to facilitate optimal learning. You've ignored your biggest resource for making pandemic learning successful. We all want to be back face-to-face full-time. The primary difference is some of us want it at any cost, and others of us see the big picture and want to do it with intention and the least amount of negative impact to the entire community. Teachers have worked tirelessly to prepare for hybrid, virtual, switching classes, and even school grades. They've made lesson plans that have had to be scrapped and revamped repeatedly. Yet now they are being blamed for not wanting to work. They want our district and children to be successful as much as we do. They just ask to be able to do that safely. This week, you have ripped away their safety net. No one should be in the position of having to beg to feel safe in their workplace. You speak often about learning loss. However, switching platforms for the third time this year will only exacerbate that problem. Conversely, kids could be allowed to continue to learn and flourish in their current routines for which they've only just begun adjusting to. We strongly urge you to reconsider. We teach our kids that character, integrity, kindness, and compassion are our core values at BPS. You have a unique opportunity in this moment to lead by example and model for our families and students that these values are intended for every human being, not just a select few within our district. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nicole Spencer. The rushed approval of the resolution to return to school full-time face-to-face K-5 and the 11th hour amendment to add 6 to 12 is very disappointing. The survey results indicated the majority, 37% of teachers at the elementary level, do not feel safe returning full-time face-to-face. I understand that a louder majority of families want to return full-time in person at any cost. But as the board, I believe it is your responsibility to only move forward with safety protocols in place. If the teachers are forced to return full-time face-to-face without critical mitigation strategies, I am concerned that many quality teachers will retire, take a leave, or resign. Educators are working tirelessly on the front lines, and they deserve a seat at the table, to be listened to and respected. Their impassioned pleas to allow the BVA and hybrid to continue as status quo seem to be ignored. They strongly urged you to take into consideration their professional, knowledgeable opinion and allow BVA and hybrid to continue respectively. With this resolution, it is unfathomable that there won't even be 3 feet of social distancing, a critical science-based safety protocol. The state is advocating for a return, but not in the way the district is purporting. I quote, "If physical distancing of 6 feet cannot be maintained in instructional settings with an all-person approach, schools should consider alternative strategies to reduce student density. This may include the use of hybrid schedule that allows students to maintain 6 feet of distancing and attend in-person school at least half time. Hybrid is currently available in our district, so this is very confusing. Many families will not take the leap from hybrid to full-time face-to-face or be very nervous about doing so because of the loss of the safety net. And many families, whether they are medically vulnerable or just following the science to help keep the community safe, and we're considering a hybrid return, no longer have that choice. There are also other perplexing safety issues, such as, but not limited to, the lack of securing vaccines for teachers and staff, not signing up for the Michigan Safe Schools testing program, and knowing new CDC guidelines about school reopening is forthcoming. The discussion to return to in-person school is often focused around the mental health of students. While this is an important point, I would advocate that the board and CLT provide more funding for counselors, social workers, and other programs, as well as a stronger SEL program to help reduce the stigma. Finally, staffing changes or potential increases in class size affect everyone. My son, who is in 2nd grade in the BVA, could end up with his 4th teacher this year. Think about not only what you are asking teachers to do professionally, but what you are asking the children to adjust to. There is a lot of discussion that children are resilient, and I agree with that. So let them finish out the year as is. Start anew next year. Thank you for your time, and BPS teachers and staff, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Hi, my name is Stacey Millichamp. I have students at Groves, BCS, and a preschooler who will be attending Beverly in the fall. As a BPS parent, I just want to go on record to say, teachers, thank you so much for everything that you've done over the past year. Your hard work, dedication, kindness, perseverance, creativity, and love have been abundantly felt in everything that you've done for our children and community. Watching the school board meeting on February 2nd, I was completely floored at how your concerns seemed to be dismissed. You are valued in this community. You are what makes our schools consistently rank among the top in the nation. I'm sorry that you were not consulted before decisions were made about your future. I'm angry at the position you've been put in. I'm extremely disappointed in our school board. Teachers, I want you to know I hear you. I see you. I appreciate you, and I support you. I know many families in our community support you as well. Please let us know how we can help you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katy, and I have a 6th grader at Berkshire Middle School, and she did make a video as well, and hopefully it'll play right after mine, so it makes sense. But we did choose the hybrid model when it came as an option, and I felt that there were enough safety protocols put in place, including some special masks and equipment so that they could participate in band in the classroom. I thought that was really great. I've been keeping up with the BOE meetings virtually, and I couldn't watch last Tuesday live, but I did watch it in the evening, and for the first 45 or so minutes, there was school after school in the public comments asking that these things stay the same, that we could stay in the hybrid model just through the end of the year for some consistency, as there'd already been so many changes for the staff and students, some of which are already on their third teacher at the elementary level. And I heard teachers asking that they be included in the decision making if it went back full face-to-face, hoping that it could stay hybrid just so that more teachers and staff could be vaccinated before the social distancing might be reduced to 3 feet or less in a full face-to-face. And then after going through the survey results of only the elementary, the motion was changed to include middle school and high school and voted upon 5-2 approval of full face-to-face on March 15th. I was surprised that maybe a criteria wasn't put in place to limit the students that would be able to return full face-to-face, as I do realize there are families that need full in-person due to learning challenges or schedules that are not flexible for virtual or hybrid learning to be valid options. But I don't feel like the teachers were heard, and it was very disappointing that their survey results that they weren't discussed more, being that less than 40% of the staff voted to go full face-to-face. And I just don't understand why that wasn't acknowledged as a reason to take pause, maybe get some results from middle school and high school, because at that level those students could serve as a bigger threat carrying the virus. And I just see that as such a lack of respect for the staff that's given so much, needing to be so flexible, making plans, teaching these kids using new technologies, responding to emails, sharing information well outside their normal work day, sanitizing classrooms and keeping our kids safe in this hybrid environment. And I would just like to say that we respect those teachers, and for that reason my daughter will be returning to full virtual if this motion stays in place. I feel like you've left us no other option. I believe it's not safe enough to have unlimited amount of students in the school and risk the teachers and staff members more than they're at risk already. And if my daughter not returning means that her teachers will have just that little bit more space in their classroom for social distancing, that I feel that's our only way of showing that we care for them and for their well-being. Thank you.
I felt really good returning to school 2 days a week. I felt safe enough to not worry about catching COVID. The teachers made sure to stay within safety protocols and kept things wiped down and kept their distance. It felt really good to be in the same room as my friends after such a long time. During virtual learning, I knew who my teachers were through a screen, but now I've really been able to see their real personalities, and they could finally meet the real me. I feel like you should give hybrid a good chance because it is working really well. The numbers are better because we're doing hybrid, but opening things up too soon will just lead to more cases. Please reconsider your decision. In the future, I want to go back to full face-to-face, but I think now is too soon. Thank you.
My name is Sean Millichamp. I'm a Groves graduate and a parent of 4 children, 1 at Groves, 2 at BCS, and 1 entering kindergarten in the fall. Our children at BCS have opted to stay fully virtual, and our sophomore at Groves is attending hybrid 2 days per week. I first want to say to the teachers, thank you for everything you do. You have done a remarkable job over the past year, working tirelessly to make sure our children continue to have a great education. I find it unconscionable that the board seemingly disregarded all of your heartfelt comments played during the February 2nd board meeting. We support you 100%. Let us know how we can help. To the board, watching these board meetings, it seems to me that perhaps you don't get what makes this district great. The most valuable asset this district has are its teachers, not the latest building upgrade or technology purchases from the bonds, the teachers. That is why we are homeowners in this district and why we send our children to BPS. You sat there and listened to comment after comment from teachers pleading with you to give the current schedule some time, pleading with you to maintain the existing CDC-compliant distancing and safety guidelines so that teachers and students can feel safe. Shame on you for barging forward. I find it repugnant that you would proceed with a change without working with the teachers. Long term, I do not see how BPS will be able to continue to attract and retain the best teachers if the board treats their concerns so dismissively and acts as if they were disposable and easily replaceable. They are not. As a parent, I am concerned that you are disregarding the recommendations from the CDC, the state of Michigan, and the Oakland County Department of Health. They are still recommending keeping a 6-foot distance between people whenever possible. It is possible. The district is doing it right now. Doing anything less needlessly puts students and teachers at risk. I'm concerned that the board seems to forget that the primary mission of the district is to educate our children, not to be a daycare facility. Having a place for your children to go all day, 5 days a week, so you don't have to parent is a byproduct of education in a traditional format, not the goal. I am concerned that you are making decisions based on personal feelings and cherry-picking things you find convenient. You do a false equivalence between bars and restaurants being open and our children and teachers being in the classroom. The comparison is deeply flawed. You ignore facts that you find inconvenient, such as restaurant capacity being limited to 25%, the fact that school lasts 7 hours rather than the length of a meal in a restaurant, and many people in this community still do not choose to sit inside a restaurant. I've repeatedly heard concerns over loss of funding due to families that have left the district this year. If we were an elementary family and my child was going to change teachers yet again, especially so close to the end of the school year, it is likely we would be removing them from the district. What is in place now is working. Give it time, leave it be. My Grove student was successful in the all virtual format, and she has continued to be successful as she transitioned to hybrid. Being able to be in person, even with just a subset of her classmates, has been important to her and is good for her social and emotional well-being. However, if you proceed with ignoring the best safety recommendations from the CDC, State of Michigan, and Oakland County Health Department, we will have no choice but to move her back to all virtual, which will be heartbreaking for her. But as parents, we often have to do what we feel is best and safest for the situation, not what we want to do in a situation. It seems clear to me that many of you are hell-bent on driving your own personal agendas. So I don't expect this comment to have any more impact with you than the many teacher comments did. I hope I am wrong. Thank you for your time. And teachers, thank you again.
BPS Board, as always, thank you for your diligence and voluntary service to the BPS community. This is Bob Sod, and if you'll allow me, there's one topic that I'd like you to consider today. District Curricular Standardization. The BPS district has generally tried to standardize its curricular approaches across subjects and across buildings in order to maintain consistency, equity, and most of all, integrity of topics taught. However, as you can imagine, some subjects such as history, language arts, humanities, and social sciences lend themselves to a far greater breadth of anecdotal information and personal opinion being interjected from teachers and administrators. This is a dangerous practice, if for no other reason than because it creates multiple pockets of socio-political and religious pedagogy in a public education classroom where the public rather expects standardization would be maintained. I personally can give multiple examples where teachers with administrators have crossed the line from maintaining standardized instruction to heralding their personal socio-political beliefs. In short, this needs to stop, and the district needs to adopt appropriately standardized teaching practices in topics such as history, language arts, and the social sciences, the same way that the district does so successfully for mathematics and the hard sciences, such as biology and chemistry and physics and engineering, etc. I suspect just about everyone hearing what I'm saying knows exactly what I'm talking about, and it remains the proverbial elephant in the middle of the room that needs to be addressed. I would also include that if the district is to be successful in this endeavor, a decidedly collaborative approach needs to be embraced, as this is not the type of endeavor that can be left up to subject coordinators or even the chief academic of the school district, who are all wonderful people who I admire and support and for whom I have a sincere community love. In too many instances, we're letting social media, propagandic news media from every direction, and unfiltered opinion shape the district curricula and classroom discussion to an extent that it's not appropriate for a public school. If our district families want decidedly politically biased and slanted history and social studies classes, our extended community is full of private schools that will accommodate for every flavor imaginable. That sort of approach, however, whether it be from the right or from the left, should have no place in the public school district. Hence, I'm asking the board and the administration to please set policy and practice that establishes that especially our history and social studies classrooms be places where, instead of trying to rewrite the events of the past, they rather inform us objectively of our past, so our current and future generations are not doomed to repeat the errors of the past. This is what politically neutral yet historically impactful public education should be all about. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Borquist, and I am the parent of 3 Birmingham Public School students, a senior, an 8th grader, and a 1st grader. All 3 have been fully virtual all year. I've lost track of how many times I have elected full virtual for them. I've already done so for my 1st grader per the district's newest request, and will do so again for my 8th grader and senior. This decision for us is equal parts medical necessity as well as a desire for consistency. And I do want to express my expectation that they will have this full virtual option through the end of the school year, though I am bracing to support them through an unnecessary set of disruptions as students join and leave their classes and their teachers likely change. This is because of the board's decision to offer a choice only between full full-time face-to-face instruction and full-time virtual. It may be that students at the high school level face these changes at the beginning of new trimesters, but it doesn't happen for the middle and elementary school students, and it shouldn't. I also felt compelled to record a public comment in advance of the February 9th board meeting for two other reasons. First, I want to make my support of Birmingham's teachers loud and clear. That so many felt public comment was their only recourse to be heard in this decision speaks volumes to a failure on the part of the district and the board to properly engage them in development of plans and the overall decision to return. Appalling. Second, I want to register the shock and outrage I felt as I watched the special board meeting last Tuesday. The premeditated amendment of the resolution to include 6 through 12 was stunning. I found myself in outright disbelief. Without surveying this population's parents and teachers, without allowing for public comment, and with no discussion of the nuanced issues associated with a face-to-face return for these students and their teachers, a vote was rushed, in part due to the need for board members to leave the meeting for other obligations. I have little faith that anything will change with regard to this decision, though I implore the board to reconsider its disrespectful and reckless path toward an ill-conceived return to full-time in-person learning at all levels. Register a pause. Seek the input from 6th through 12th grade families and teachers. Give the central leadership team time to consider the results of those surveys and to develop a plan. Share that plan with the community so that parents can make an informed decision about whether to return full-time in person or to remain virtual. You owe that and so much more to this district's students and teachers. They are the ones who will bear the burden of this change, the setback that yet another and unnecessary change to learning format will bring to so many, and they bear the burden of the continued risk of contracting COVID-19, particularly as it mutates while teachers and older high school students struggle to attain vaccinations.
Thank you, Alan, for running the videos. And again, thank you to our community members for your input and submission. Trustees, the next item on the agenda is our presentation discussion section. The first is the MASB Board of Directors Region 8 vote. Amy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything to add, next week, trustees, there is one open spot for Region 8, and we're being asked to vote on that on the candidate. Amy, again, I don't want to put you on the spot if you have anything to add. Trustees, in your packet, there was a dossier on each of the candidates, their tenure, their quotes, things like that. So I will ask all of you to please take a look at that prior to next Tuesday's meeting, so that we are able to place a vote and then submit that to MASB. Amy, please.
Just quickly, OCSBA did have 3 of the candidates for Region 8 at their last meeting, which was last Wednesday. Nicole and I were both on that call. Both of the 3 candidates who were available, which were Birgit McQuiston, Gina Walker, and Mary Hanser, all did speak. I believe, Nicole, did they record that? Or was it only a live recording? I don't know if she knows. Anyway, I do think there was one candidate who had a little bit more experience, but I mean, I don't know if Nicole has an opinion.
Nicole, you're on mute.
Oh.
You're not on mute, but we can't hear you. No.
Oh, that's weird. Oh.
No.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
And so again, trustees, I'll ask you to please take a look at that, that packet that was sent on Friday's board book or board docs and become familiar with the candidates. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Amy and Nicole on those three that did speak. The next consideration is the resolution for the in-person board meetings. That was again in this Friday's packet. This is coming as a recommendation from MASB. And again, as I started out the meeting, currently right now, we are under the emergency orders of the MDHHS to not meet in person till at least March 31st. And I know there's been some dialogue, pushback, and input that if we are having our students go back, that we as board trustees should be going back as well. So this resolution, if we so choose to vote on it next in 2 weeks, is simply just saying to the governor and the MDHHS that we would like to go back to being able to legally have meetings in person as soon as possible. Amy, again, I hate to put you on the spot, but I know that you had heard about this through your OCSBA contact. So I don't know if you have anything else to add on this one.
No, nothing other than I support the fact that if we can have children in schools and we support that, then we should be able to meet in person. It does provide, it would still provide for the option for somebody to participate remotely if they needed to for medical or some other reasons that are spelled out.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. And the other thing is, for the month of October, we met, the board met face to face. We were set up in the Groves, was it the little theater or the big auditorium? And little theater, and we were socially distanced, and it was just great to see each other and welcome that camaraderie. So I'm looking forward to that again.
I would just ask, this isn't part of the motion, but I think that there's been some perks to being virtual in terms of accessibility to us. And I hope that some of those systems can stay in place. For example, prior to COVID, only our business meeting was aired on YouTube and I think local cable television. I don't know if it still goes on there, but now by virtue of being virtual, all our meetings are accessible, and you notice more public comment as a result and things like that. So I'd like us, when we do come back, whether it's, you know, sooner than March 30th or after March 30th, that we think creatively about how we can maintain some of these systems that have allowed for more public comment and greater accessibility and transparency.
Thank you, Trustee Young. And yes, we have heard that from the community, and that is discussions that we've had with Dr. Heisch, with Dwight Levins, and with Alan Ledford. Is our intention is to continue live streaming all of the meetings, whether they're study sessions or board meetings, regular meetings. We're running into a little bit of a couple pieces of technology that we needed to order. So those have been ordered, but yes, I think we all feel the same way, that we want to keep the whole transparency and what I'll call ease of dialing in to see us going, even though historically we may have never had those specific sessions on video stream. So given where we are right now in the world. So thank you. Okay, trustees, up next, the consideration for the resolution of winter sports. That is irrelevant given the MHHSA ruling. That resolution was just from a high school perspective, asking the governor to bring sports back. But again, that is kind of null given the latest ruling last week. Next up, the first consideration of discussion, the school school personnel vaccines. Again, this is based on a recommendation from MASB. Again, saying that we want to get back face-to-face as much as we can, and we're hoping that the government can really focus on getting our faculty immunized. So again, something to discuss. Trustee or Treasurer Holcomb.
Actually, this one didn't come from MASB. It was presented from some people from OCSBA.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
But again, it is the largest problem with vaccine distribution at this point for teachers is that they fall in the 1B category. And currently in Oakland County, whatever supply they receive, 75 to 80% of it goes to anybody 65 and older, and the remaining percentage is for everybody else who falls into the 1B category. And so we're simply asking that the state prioritize teachers and perhaps allocate more of that vaccine supply to make sure that teachers can come back to the classroom after vaccination.
Also, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Nicole's asking if we can hear her, and we can't. Sorry, Nicole. No. Trustee Joseph, go ahead, hon.
Yeah, thank you. Also, just as few of you know, that I have many medical professions in my family, so I kind of get information from them. So I was informed that effective today or tomorrow, it's pretty soon, sometime this week, the retail, like Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, they're going to get 60% of the vaccination versus 40% will go to the hospitals. So it's going to be more available to public soon.
Thank you. Trustee Young?
I would just point out, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, President Whitman. I would just point out that in the proposed resolution, it does emphasize, and this is quoting from the resolution, that officials must remain vigilant and 100% committed to safety measures. And it states, quote, success in reopening schools now requires broad access to the COVID-19 vaccine for the school employees that come into direct contact with students. That's in direct conflict to the vote we had last meeting, where we have said we are not going to be 100% committed to safety measures, and where presently we intend to reopen schools without broad access to the COVID-19 vaccine.
Adrienne, just a point, this is only about vaccinating teachers, and we do have a fairly large amount of our teachers already vaccinated. I believe Scott Worrow said more than 50%, and that was in under a month because vaccines for teachers were available initially on January 11th. I certainly hope by March 15th we'll be well into the 80% category for at least one vaccine.
President Whitman?
Yeah, sorry.
I have a quick, I think Dr. Heitch mentioned in our BEF meeting yesterday, what was it, 51% of our teachers have either received their first dose or have appointments for their first dose as of right now.
Yep, that's correct. That was as of last week. So it might be even higher by now, a little bit higher.
Anything else, trustees? Okay, so again, a resolution to consider to vote on next in our next regular meeting. Next up, the International Academy requested amendments and resolutions. Dr. Heisch, I will turn that over to you, please.
Thank you very much. Just to refresh your memory, about a year ago, we went through a revision of the bylaws for the International Academy Consortium. And at that point, maybe last February or March, you voted on some revised bylaws and agreements for the International Academy. Those agreements expanded the kind of the governing body so that Birmingham and Troy at that point both got seats at the superintendent level on the governing board. This most recent document that I brought to you for consideration for the next meeting is just a cleanup of those bylaws. There are no structural changes that were made. They have been in guidance and we've been operating under them for this past year. It doesn't change the governance structure. It doesn't change the expense structure. It just did clean up some language and got a little bit more voice for Bloomfield Hills. So we'll bring this back to you and ask for your approval at the next meeting.
Trustees, any questions? Nope. Okay, thank you, Dr. Heisch. Next up for discussion is the business services section of the agenda. We have a couple recommendations and bid packages that Jim and some Scott's here. So Jim, I'll turn it over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Yes, tonight we have Scott with us from Plant Moran Cressa. We've been working with staff and architects, construction managers to bring proposals for Pierce Cafeteria Addition, for Groves Maintenance Building and tennis courts, and also the C Home. We're going to be doing a guidance counselor office and accounts payable, assistant principal's offices. And then we pulled the generator at BCS up because it was in about year 3, but it's failing. And, that's an important site because that has our head-end room for the district and computers. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and Scott will go over those bids with you.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for giving us a few minutes of your time tonight. It's nice to be back in front of you. The last time we spoke, we really broke free on our bid pack 1, which was our bleacher package. So here we are back in February. We've got 4 different proposals for your consideration this evening, and I will go through them briefly, one at a time. So the first one is bid pack number 1-1, which is our first elementary program. That's Pierce Elementary. And that really is the biggest component being the new cafeteria addition that we showed graphically back in December with our presentation. We're also renovating portions of the building as well, converting the old cafeteria, remodeling bathrooms and such. But we've been busy in the month of January with different bids. We are bidding out, this one's with Rockford Construction, and we had roughly 60 bids come in. We have accepted 3 of the 7 alternates for your recommendation. The first one being renovations to the art room. These are really cosmetic upgrades with the casework that was really kind of in poor repair, and other flooring remodels and just some sink replacements as well. We're also recommending a chiller replacement. This is the second chiller there. The first chiller was part of the original scope and was included in the original base bid numbers, but things have changed since we did the assessment. That chiller, much like the BCS generator, is exhibiting some stress, and it made sense to replace it now with the other work under all the same permits. And then the third alternate is just to repave a small portion of the bus loop. We're having to repave that bus loop and make some changes based on the location of the addition. And so this would allow us to just have a complete new bus loop without seams, without having to go back in a few years and just replace a small piece of that. We felt that was an opportune time to do it. We received, again, numerous bids, but there were 4 bid categories that we are going to be rebidding. we either were not satisfied with the results or we did not receive enough bids to open. And so we'll be rebidding those. Those are going out this week, and we will be rebidding those over the next couple of weeks and hope to have those back in our March board sessions for review. And that will really provide a complete package here relative to the Pierce project. In total, we've got just under $5.2 million in hard construction bids. We're recommending a contingency of 7.5%, amounting to $389,616. We do have some construction manager costs on top of that, but ultimately we're recommending a total recommendation of $5,819,390. We're pretty close to budget here. We will be probably a little bit over when we go ahead and award those remaining categories. But again, we've been very diligent, and this really applies to all the packages we'll be recommending tonight. But just a really huge thank you to everybody from the district. It's amazing how many people have been a participant in our meetings, in our discussions, circling back through with even the bid results and talking through how they came in and what makes the most sense moving forward. Everybody, and this has been an incredible year, but people have still found the time and made the effort to really be a big participant. And we feel really good about where we're at with the project and the level of buy-in and support we have so far. So that's really Pierce Elementary. If there's any questions on Pierce, please go ahead and ask them, and I will address them as they come up.
Hey, Scott, I have a question. This is Adrienne. You mentioned that we're close to and perhaps we'll go over budget. Is that because of increased materials cost just because more people are building right now during COVID?
You know, it's hard to say. We are definitely seeing some pressures. One being the time of the year. The bidding cycle has continuously moved up year over year, and this year it's even accelerated more. So with the amount of bond work that's occurring in Southeast Michigan, and, you know, the race that is to get out to bids, we're seeing that. And so that's some of it. You know, in future bid packs, I think we hope to gain a little bit more bids in each of our categories. And I think we'll get there as in future years when we kind of get on the right side of the design curve. But with just passing a major bond and assembling the team, we're a little bit slow out of the gate just because we had to put all the pieces together. But we're also seeing some incredible pressures on things such as steel. There's a ton of volatility in the market with steel. All of the numbers came in on that category significantly over what we had estimated for that work. And we're hearing that there's a lot of these suppliers are holding their numbers firm for relatively short windows of time because there's a volatility. And because of that, it's not just the steel that builds your building. Steel is in your ductwork too. So all of a sudden your mechanical bids are seeing an increase in cost too. So anything with steel in it, definitely going higher, but we're all seeing it across the board. It is a little bit challenging out there in terms of the bid market right now. There are some pressures, and I think we're doing our best to get through this first year, and you know, we'll just keep plugging away. We're going to keep trying to time the market. We're going to, you know, with the outreach that the construction managers have done to, I've seen their list of people they've reached out to, and it's quite encompassing. But there's a lot of work out there, and you know, we're just going to keep trying to get the bids and get the right firms here in the district to build these projects.
You know, Adrian, we were discussing this the other day, and there's in the Southeast Michigan, there's approximately $3 billion worth of bonds that have passed. So you have all the schools going for the same contractors. A lot of the private contractors, you know, maybe that are doing office buildings or something, don't really venture into schools. So there's a limited trades out there. So it's, you know, it'll be beneficial to get out there quicker next year, get out in, you know, October, November even. So it's a really competitive market for school work.
I guess I was just wondering, and Scott, your emphasis on the volatility and Jim, you saying 1 year, is this a situation where we need to go back and add, you know, X amount of dollars onto every project and maybe reorg at the end, and switch categories of what's most important for the last 5 items on the list, or is it just impossible to say because of how volatile things are, and hopefully we'll get out sooner next year?
That's a great question. So one, hopefully we do get out quicker next year, but we also have to remember we did a 10-year capital plan. So the idea with this was not, a $195 million bond. The idea is to go out in 2025 or 2026 to complete those projects. So to your point, it's a possibility that you could delay some of the projects, or we're looking at projects within a school. So we're using each school as the budget center and trying to stay within that budget. So
yep, we've said that too. I think that we want to do things the right way as well. We want to be conscious about that. We want to do it the Birmingham way as well, and making sure that we're thinking about the budget, but we're also making really smart decisions that will hold. These are capital assets that the district's going to hold for a long time, and just doing it the right way has been kind of the focus of our meetings as well.
Well, and I would add that, when you add people into the mix, you get a lot more opinions, you get a lot more ideas. So the scope has dramatically increased on some of these projects. And I think we're going to go over that with the finance committee. We did a little bit of that yesterday, actually. And we plan to go over this in more detail at March and talk about some of the things that you just brought up and discuss those with the finance committee. I think it's you, Scott.
Okay, no more questions on Pierce? All right, I will move on to our second recommendation. This is over at Birmingham Covington School, and as Jim mentioned, this is the replacement of the existing emergency generator. This is the one that, if you were approaching the school, it's near the front entrance there off to your right. This one's been kind of on the mend for a long, or not on the mend, I should say. It's been trending the wrong way for a number of years. It's at a point where it was no longer feasible to keep sinking any money into it to try to fix it and prolong this. It was a time to replace it. So as Jim said, we pulled this project forward. We peeled it out of the BCS master program and just bid it out. So this is a replacement generator for what's currently there. It also involves adding some additional loads into the generator. A big chunk of this generator is housing the technology department, and a large amount of the load on it is from the technology services. So it's very important that this thing function properly, and when it's called into action, that it reacts. So this is simply a replacement of a 250 kW generator, pretty much a 1-for-1 with some additional circuitry. We took bids earlier in January. We got 5 bids, good results. We are going here with the second bidder, Sawyer Services. If you'll refer to the bid tabs, you will see that the first and second bidder were very close. After interviewing them both, looking at some of their references, seeing where their experience lies, we really felt it was in the district's best interest to recommend the second bidder, given their K-12 experience and work in the K-12 arena, because really you're reporting to the state of Michigan. There's a lot of different things that go into the K-12 world that are unique, and it's important to have vendors, especially during the busy summer months, that understand the process and know the people involved. In totality, that was the bids for the construction was $199,700. Some small CM fee costs, and again, here we're recommending a slightly higher contingency of 10%. Again, given the smaller nature of the project, for a total recommendation of $223,864. And just for those listening in, the contingency is something we set aside. If it's not used, it simply goes back to the owner, to the district, and it can be used for future work. Lori? Or, sorry, any questions?
Actually, you just, in your last sentence, You just answered my question. I was just going to say, does the bidder that we chose, do they take away the generator and reuse it? Do they recycle it? Do they? But you already responded, so we're gonna use it.
This one really has no real value. Maybe there's some copper in it or something like that that someone
Scrap metal, probably.
Yeah. And that's something too, if there was any value in something that we were removing, you know, the district would really get first dibs at it if there was some salvage value or facilities could use it or components of it for maintenance down the road, that would be considered.
Well, that generator was so loud. You could hear it like 2 or 3 blocks away. So I just was hoping that perhaps, I don't know, if they recycle it or like you said, scrap metal, just that it's kind of repurposed in some form, way. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Scott.
Trustee, Treasurer Hokemark?
Scott, just quick question. So does this generator, in addition to being the backup for everything in that computer area, is it also the backup for the whole school when the electricity goes out?
It is. It's going to provide those life safety, those critical loads. I mean, again, the use of a generator in the school district is not really to make a building function exactly like it would under normal power. It is purely to address some of the situations that arise as a result of it and protect the district's assets. For example, you know, we're going to make sure that the boilers are powered on in a power failure. That way, if it's the dead middle of winter and it's this week, you know, and you get some freezing temperatures, that we're not creating a problem within the building. The water freeze, if you will. So it is also doing those functions at BCS as a whole, but it's also servicing the technology services department.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I guess I could mention quickly too that, you know, when we went through our district standards discussion where we went through everything, we had a lot of good discussion about all things that go into construction, but we talked specifically about generators and the types of things that are important to be on it, you know, what kind of manufacturers we like and all that good stuff. And so we've been putting that to the test. So we have a generator package here. We'll have another one for you in March over at Midvale for your consideration as well. Are there any other questions on the generator over at BCS? Okay. Our third recommendation is a combination of a few different projects. And so this is, well, we've referred to them as bid packs, but bid pack 1, really, if you'll recall back in December, we awarded the bleacher project, but one bid we did not recommend was the site work bidder. We had one bid. We didn't like the number, and we felt like with all this upcoming work over at Groves and other areas that, hey, why could we package this a different way? So part of this award recommendation is actually bringing that site work. It's part of this recommendation. It's also the maintenance building that we're going to be building over on the northeast side of the Groves campus, which also includes 3 new tennis courts, some site work, a fair amount of site utilities that go to support that building. And it also includes over at the transportation yard, a new storage building and some site improvements in and around it with the goal of getting rid of a lot of the things that you currently see over at Groves near the stadium right now. And then lastly, as part of the interior work over at Seaholm, and as Jim mentioned, it's really a complete redo of the counseling area. It's some assistant principal offices. It is some pilot toilet rooms near the little theater on the first floor. And then it is also converting the old TV studio in the lower level into some classroom and community room space that will currently be used by users of the annex building, the adult transition program. But ultimately, it can be used by Seaholm as well as Lincoln Street Alternative as well. So again, this project went out for bid in January. We took bids on January the 27th. We ended up extending the general trades category a couple days just because we only received just the one bid. We took bids and recommended out of the 6 alternates, we're recommending 5 of them. The first 3 really involve adding some vision into areas that currently don't have it. This would be adding a transaction window into the CSO office, adding 2 more windows into the the conference room in the main office. And then also some windows into that lower level TV studio. If you guys have ever been in that building, it's a very landlocked room. It's got walls all around it, and there's just not much visibility into it. The 4th alternate that we're recommending is actually over at Grove's Maintenance Building, and this consists of a canopy off the new maintenance building that would be used to kind of cover some of its covered area that will help protect some of the investments of the district. And then lastly, we're recommending a portion of an alternate for a future lift that goes in that maintenance building. What we want to do is we want to pour there's talk about adding a hoist in this area in the future. And if we do that, it has some structural requirements of this floor slab. And so what we're doing with this recommendation is we're recommending to take the alternate for the concrete so that we can increase that floor thickness now. That way, when the district goes to do that hoist in the future, potentially, that we're all set for it. It's just a matter of adding the hoist and hooking up the power to it. We're not making any structural modifications to the building. So that one just made sense in terms of the sequencing and phasing of the work. In totality, we're recommending about roughly $4.5 million. So $4,440,673. That's your hard construction. Some CM costs and fees of $145,080, and a 7.5% construction contingency here of $333,050. So again, the total recommendation just south of 5 million at 4,918,803. And this would be a complete award here. There are no categories that were going to be rebid. Just moving quickly on your sheet, you'll see some budget summaries. Adrian, similar to your question, we did see some budget challenges here. The scope kind of grew a little bit, but we've also had some challenges with the market. We've also had really some challenges with the site. The putting this building where it is, required a fair amount of utility work, getting water and power and gas and all that stuff out to that location. The other thing with this maintenance building, as promised in the original campaign, is that this is going to have 2 bathrooms in it that will be accessible to those that are in and around the tennis court area, which is going to make it much more convenient for everybody, because it was kind of a long walk really from there to anywhere, if you could even get back into the school. So that's the next packages. We have a couple more coming up in March, but that's for March. Can I answer any questions about this one?
I don't think so, Scott. I think we're good.
Okay, thanks. And then it brings me to really our last one, and this is an abatement recommendation for over at Pierce Elementary School. There is some environmental items that need to be abated as a part of the construction renovation work, and most of this work occurs in the bathrooms. But we work with the district's environmental consultant, Arch Environmental Group. They publicly bid this work out. Got 7 different bids. They're recommending really the low bidder here, which is On-Site Solutions Incorporated, for $34,260 to do that work. And this work will occur this summer. There is a little bit of abatement work that will occur in phase 2 of Pierce in that second summer, but we'll simply combine that work with whatever else other environmental work we have to do in the district next year to support those projects. We're recommending a $15,000 contingency here for a total recommendation on this project of $49,260. So again, good bid turnout. Pretty straightforward bid here at Pierce. Jim, is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think you covered it all very well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustees, any questions? Scott or Jim? No? Okay. Thanks so much, Scott and Jim. So we will be voting on these resolutions in 2 weeks, trustees. So again, just wanted to give you the background. Certainly read those bid packages. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jim. Okay, last up, Jim, under the business services piece is the budget amendment.
All right, thank you. I think I'll be able to share my screen. Okay. And okay, so normally we do a budget amendment in February. This one is very interesting. When we met with Finance Committee yesterday, you know, I would like to do a little bit different of a presentation because last year was an unusual year, so it really doesn't lend to comparisons that much because, you know, as we get into it, you'll see that we discontinued purchasing in March, except for essential items. We didn't do a lot of purchase services and some of the things that we would normally do. So our purchase services budget was very low, and some of our salary budgets were low because of open positions. So, so the first comparison, and what I did here is I put 4 years in. So I put, because if you compare the 2019-20, you're going to see some unusual items once we get to the expenses. As far as the revenues go, we had discussed this before where originally we had projected a $650 per pupil reduction in the state revenue. So the state revenue is up about $3.9 million. Overall, the revenues are up $4.2 million to $120.1 million. So we're just recognizing the changes there that were brought forward with different estimates. And just looking at the comparison of what was at the original budget and what we know now, you know, again, it's the hold harmless rate. The one point that I do want to point out on local here is the reduction in community education rentals. So our original budget, we budgeted at about 75%. So that was $1.1 million. We have very few rentals this year. We're actually coming in at about $93,000. So if you compare that to 2019-20, we're almost $1.4 million. So that's a substantial reduction in the revenue area. I anticipate that this will come back next year. You know, once we get to a position where we can run the programs, you know, with community ed, their big revenue is in the summer. So if we have summer programs, they would be able to run those programs. If not, we'll be able to know that up front. The other area here is interest revenue. So we had originally budgeted $300,000. As we all know, the rates have basically gone down to zero. So we've reduced that to $75,000. Comparing that to last year, we had interest revenue of $461,000. So a substantial decrease there. And that's one I do not anticipate coming back next year. You know, it's projected that rates will stay down until the economy comes back and, you know, the jobless rates are lower. And I do want to look at the—
Jim, I have a question about that last slide.
Yeah.
It's okay. Is that okay, President Whitman, if I ask now? So for folks in the community who have been following along and hearing about families leave our district, both the estimate of reduction of 50 and then the change to reduction of 107 might feel low. Can you explain that a little bit, just the difference in what we've heard versus what we're seeing on this budget slide?
Yeah. Actually, I will do that in a little bit more detail in the next slide. If you want me to go to the next slide and point that out. Okay, thank you. So, Adrian, to your point, we normally do, in the state aid formula, it's a 90-10 formula normally. And the 90-10 means that you take 10% from the previous winter count and you take 90% from the fall count. Because there was such change in enrollment, the school aid bill for this year changed that to a 75-25. So that's a 75% of last year's FTE and 25% of this year's FTE. So to highlight that, if you look at the amount that with a 75-25, our loss was about 107 students, while at this time it was 131. So we're looking at $1.6 million loss, whereas if we would have had the 90-10 formula this year, we would have been at $5.8 million loss on state aid. I hope that answered your question, because what we were looking at is we lost about 500 students. So that impact wasn't felt as much with a 75-25 instead of a 90-10.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps. But again, so right there, you said we lost about 500 students, but the previous slide says a decrease of 107 full-time equivalents.
Yes.
Talk to me about the difference between those two numbers.
Okay, well, first there's head count versus FTEs. So head counts are any student that's in the building. And FTE would be, we have students that have half a day or don't have a full schedule. So then you convert that to a FTE. And the 107, so under a normal situation, like on this next slide, if we were doing the 90-10, we would have had an FTE loss of 472. So that 500 did not impact us as much with the 75-25 because we took last year's numbers.
Okay.
No, ask questions, please, if I'm not explaining it well.
I understand how the change in the formula changes the amount of money we've lost. I just don't understand how the change in the formula changes the number of students that we've lost. Can you try and do that again?
Yeah. So looking at this chart, if you look at the top, so last year we had 7,950 students, FTEs. So we multiplied that by 75%. So when you multiply that by 75%, you get about 6,000. So this year, our fall count was 7,425. And you're only multiplying that by 25%. So you're getting 1,850. So our FTE for this year is 7820. And
sorry, so I'm gonna stop you real quick. So that 1.6 million in the red is the equivalent of 107 FTE with the old formula.
With the new formula.
The new
formula.
The new formula.
If we had the old formula is on the bottom.
Right.
So if so you switch it back to the 90-10. So we would take 10% of the 7950 and 90% of the 7425. So the loss of students has a much greater impact with a 90-10 formula.
I guess I'm wondering why the change isn't 500 FTE. Why is it 107?
It's 107 just because of the mix of the years that you're using. I mean, instead of using 90% of this year's number, you're only using 25.
when we say the change is 107 FTE, that doesn't necessarily mean only 107 bodies are different from this year to last year. That means the financial equivalent of 107 FTEs are out of our budget for this year.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based on the calculation, right, Jim?
Based on the old or the new calculation that's better, that means less loss. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But
So people
Jim,
looking at that aren't like, whoa, what much better news. That it's not that we lost 107 bodies. It's the financial equivalent.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Nicole, I did hear you. Just briefly.
Yay.
There you go.
So, but it will catch up with us next year.
You guys are helping me out because the next one is, here's the next slide. So what I wanted to do is point out next year, if we go back to a 90-10 formula. So when we talked with Finance Committee, we were looking at, what do we anticipate the students coming back? It's going to be very hard to project. So what we're estimating, half of our student loss will come back. And this is, half the FTE. So we're assuming that 231 FTE will return to the district next year. Using a 90-10 formula, which would have been last year, we're looking at a estimate for FTEs of 7,682. And this year's FTEs are 7,843. So we're looking at a loss of 161 FTEs for next year. And based on our current foundation amount, that's almost $2 million loss. So you can see how we have fewer loss of students, but because the formula changed, it has a higher financial impact. Does that help? Okay, all right. Nicole, did that help you? Okay, all right. Yeah, Lori.
And tomorrow's count day. I mean, these count days are so incredibly important, and you can see why.
Yes, yeah. So that's a great point, what you just pointed out. I mean, this is a fall count that we're using. So tomorrow's count, it's hard to tell what tomorrow's count will be. So. Okay, any other questions on revenues before I go into expenses? Okay, so looking at the expenditures, again, I want to break it out a little bit differently because we don't normally break it out by salaries, benefits. We really look at, instruction, support services. So I really wanted to give you a view from, salary, benefits, and just to get a good feel for, where we are there. So if you compare it to the original budget that we had for the beginning of this year, we're really not that far off. It's, as far as salaries and benefits, it's a net about $200,000, and a non-payroll, which I'll go over a lot more in a little bit here, is almost $500,000. And that is really identified in the $500,000 that we put into the general fund for COVID expenses that we subsequently moved into the COVID grant once we received it. So, and salaries and benefits, they're really based on our current staffing. So that can change as staff changes throughout the year, but at this point that would be the payroll and the staffing that we had in place in January. And, as in the previous slide, you did see that the retirement and FICA is up a little bit. So what I did was I looked at previous years, and our original budget was budgeted at a FICA and retirement to salaries of about 40.2%. Over the past years, well, the previous year was 48.2. So when I looked at all the salaries and adjusted retirement to 40.2% and FICA at 7.4. If somebody's in payroll, you'd say FICA is 7.65. Well, we have payments that we make as far as, people don't have their full salary. They have 403Bs, so that's not taxed. And then also we pay, some things are not FICA applicable. Again, benefits are based on current enrollment. And the last item there is the reduction of the $502,000 that we budgeted in the original budget to start buying COVID PPE supplies and equipment. Any questions on any of this?
Jim, I have a question.
Yeah.
I noticed under the other increases, you mentioned the IA tuition increase.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also going to go up again next year? Or it worked out a formula?
Yeah, we worked out a formula last year, so we knew that was going to increase this year. And that was to recognize districts that, their foundation amount wasn't as much. So we still don't include the hold harmless in there, but we take some recognition that we have a higher foundation amount.
So, so that is going to be a permanent increase.
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you.
So, as we're starting to look at the budget, I mean, you saw that it's a $5 million deficit. I mean, we do have a structural deficit. We've had it for a couple of years now, and it's something that we're going to have to look at. But I want to point out teaching and learning budget. So if you look back to 2017-18, we were spending $2 million. I mean, this is textbooks, it's supplies for teaching, it's professional development. Now, we have made significant budget cuts in this area. The first budget cut in 2018-19, CBC, reduced part of the budget. And then we reduced the full textbook budget for 1 year. And last year, it's a little bit more dramatic because, again, we stopped buying supplies. Normally, you'd buy textbooks at the end of the year for the following year. So that $1 million drop off is really not a $1 million drop off under normal circumstances. But I do want to point out this year's budget, we're at $950,000. At some point, talking to MPICA and, just CLT, we definitely have to invest in our instruction. So at some point, we're going to have to come back and buy textbooks. This budget will have to increase at some point. So. And then I want to take a look at some of the other costs that we have, the major departments. Major department is facilities. So if if you were just to look at the budget overall, you would, without knowing much about it, you'd say, oh, we went from $8.8 million to 7.3. Well, that's really not true because if you look at the GRBS contract below, we were paying almost $3.9 million. Now we're paying 2.2 because what we did last year, or for this year, we moved head custodians into our buildings. So those are district employees now. So you have the corresponding reduction and you have the corresponding increase in the salaries and benefits on the other side. So this really is a little bit of a wash. I think that it was a benefit of a couple $100,000 to the district. The other item that I want to point out is utilities. So utilities last year we had at $2.5 million. Again, our buildings, we still have to operate the buildings. You don't have to heat them at 70 or 72, but you still have to maintain everything in the building. And then the last item is insurance. This is a constant $200,000. So if you look at the bottom line for what we invest in facilities, it's around $2 million, and that's steady from a normal year. Okay, then transportation budget. We did sign a 5-year contract last year with 0% increases for the first 2 years. So this is steady at this point. Next year, we will get the benefit of 14 buses that we bought. We'll have a little reduction. We should see a reduction in this area of about $8,000 a bus. So it should be a little bit less next year. But this is basically a fixed cost. I mean, there's not much that we can do about that.
Jim, I have a question about that. How is it that we're doing double the amount of runs for elementary and we don't have increased cost?
Well, this is what's budgeted. This is by contract. So throughout the year, we're going to have to start looking at that. You know, at the beginning of the year, we weren't busing as many students. So with the ramp up going in, it wasn't as significant at the beginning of the year, but I think, you know, or these next couple months, we might see an increase here.
Okay, thank you.
Community education. I wanted to bring this back up because, you know, I did point out we were bringing in revenue and rentals and, you know, community ed of about $1.4 million. The program was budgeted at almost $600,000 because we didn't run last year's summer program. We won't have those costs. So it's not a full loss of 1.3 or 4. It's offset by a reduction in costs. Then I just wanted to do a summary of the general fund and you know, showing the years. So, you know, if you look at the original budget, again, we were estimating almost a $10 million deficit, but that was with the $650 reduction per pupil. With the change, we're looking at about $5 million deficit, excuse me. And then I also added, now we've heard about the governor's proposal of the discretionary funding, and the district would receive about $2.5 million. Now, I can't build this into the budget because we don't have it finalized. We don't know the number. This is just the executive budget. But I do want to recognize that there's potential of receiving that. So, you know, that $5 million would be cut in half. But I do want to say that this is one-time funding. So this is not something that will carry forward. We still have a structural deficit. This is just pushing it off for a year if we receive it and we can use it for general fund purposes. Yeah, Nicole.
Jim, excuse me, isn't there a discussion about possibly receiving federal funding as well? Would we be eligible for some of that funding, and has that been factored into this budget?
You know, that's a great question, and it's on a slide coming up. So, all right, so this would leave us at a 14% fund balance. That's within our, you know, it's not 20%, but I mean, we're still pretty safe for now. And so Nicole, this is sort of getting, this is the funding that we did receive. This is the ESSER grant, which would be federal, and that comes by Title I formula. We received the Oakland County, we received funds from the state, and then the school aid. You know, I do want to point out that our local private and parochial schools did receive funding too. So this is not just for the public school. In fact, you know, we looked online and, you know, where we were receiving, you know, about $500 per pupil, some of the private and parochials were receiving, you know, $2,500 to $4,000 per pupil. Also, they took out some PPE loans. So I believe those may have been forgiven at some point. I'm not really sure, but I just want to point out that the funding is not only for public schools. And then this is a little bit more detail on the $4 million that we received. You can see where we've spent it with salaries, benefits, FICA. A lot of purchase services for cleaning the buildings at the start of the year. A lot of this is water remediation and testing. And then, of course, supplies and equipment, about $2.5 million. So this, actually, I want to go to one slide where the remainder of this will be spent. So Nicole, this is getting to your question. So the ESSER 2 formula, it basically, gave us 5 times the amount. Again, that is by Title I funding. So that's based on your free and reduced population. This is something that we've talked about for summer school, summer remediation. That would be a possibility and a use for this funding. And then again, the governor's amount that the executive budget initiative of the $2.5 million that we're still waiting to find out what happens with that. And with that, I think that is all that I have on the budget. Any questions?
Thank you, Jim.
All right, thank you.
So trustees, again, this is for the discussion. We will see this resolution in 2 weeks. We will have to vote on an amendment. So we will see that in our packet, like I said, in 2 weeks. Okay, thanks, Jim. Next up, technology presentation. Hello, Mr. Levens. Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. Are you all able to see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, good evening. I'm joined by Lindsay Johnson Lemieux from Barton Malo. She's hopefully on the screen somewhere. I've got several screens here, so I can't see the thumbnail of Lindsay right now, but I'm sure she's on. We're going to go through a quick review of the technology bid packs that are going to come before you at the next board meeting for approval. And as with all of our technology bond projects, we label them with the letter T and then a following number. So this is T3 and T4. I'm going to go through a brief description of what T3 specifically entails, and that is our video surveillance expansion. Just to go through a brief history, back in 2018, our board approved the purchase and installation of a district-wide video surveillance system, or what most people would just call a camera system in all of our buildings, for all of them, K through 12. And a part of that process, whenever you install a system that's that large, that touches so many users, you go through an initial phase where you meet with all the stakeholders, such as staff, office staff, and potentially some teachers, depending on the building. And then you get ideas around what all they need and want covered. Then there's a period where people have to live with that system. And then inevitably there are wants and desires that come up. So that's what this bid pack actually addresses. Here is an example of a building map. This does not outline new cameras that will be added. This just gives you, again, a walk down memory lane of what you saw when we were together in 2018. This is an example of the type of coverage that all of our buildings have internally. This is Greenfield Elementary specifically, highlights the different areas that are captured, and that's an interior view. You have the first floor, then you have the second floor, very similar. Then you have an exterior view. We wanted to make sure, well, Lindsay actually specifically spent a lot of time with principals and just going around to every single building at the high schools. Some security personnel were even involved. And we tried to make sure we were capturing any blind spots or areas that initially they might not have thought they needed coverage in, but now we've come back and circled to coverage is needed. I wanted to show this example specifically because way back in 2018, I remember it, a few board members who were present at the time were asking, why didn't we just cover the entire building? Like if you look at this image in the lower right-hand corner, you can obviously see that there's some area where you don't have the red outlines and there may not be some coverage at that particular spot. And so obviously, again, once you've lived with the system for a while, the coverage that you thought was good, you might need to expand. And even some of those cameras that you see there, Lindsay took the time to meet with our vendor, as well as principals, to get an idea of cameras that may need to be adjusted. If, for example, you look at the camera on the left-hand side that's shooting directly towards the parking lot, In some instances where we may have thought let's say a 5 megapixel camera was sufficient, when things happen in that space and it's time to go back and review footage, you can wind yourself up in a situation where you realize you need a better camera. So you might need an 8 megapixel camera to better capture what's happening in that area. So right now, I'll turn it over to Lindsay to kind of go through the details of the work that's been done for BidPack T3.
Thank you, Dwight. Good evening, everybody. This is my first time meeting everyone, so I'm happy to be here. I did definitely do a lot of research when we submitted the bids for this video surveillance expansion. I wanted to make sure that we were covering any areas that were missed the last time. When we went out to bid, we got 6 bids. They were all very good competitive bids. We did do post bids with 3 different companies. Right now we are still in the checking of references stage, and by the next time we meet, we'll have some recommendations. We did have a budget cost, an estimated budget cost for this project alone, just under $600,000. This was a part of the 2020 technology bond budget, so we also have a line item for everything here. And at this moment, I believe there's only one alternate that would be added to the recommendation.
So just to piggyback on what Lindsay just mentioned, this was, again, just to make sure everybody's clear, this was a project that was budgeted in this 2020 bond. And this also covers some of the work that Jim and Scott outlined earlier for those new renovations and additions onto buildings. Those areas will require additional cameras as well. So this captures all of that too.
Thanks.
Yep, BidPack T4. I'll let Lindsay jump into the details on this one in one moment. Just again, want to paint the picture for you all of one specific portion, which does have a large dollar amount attached to it. If you notice in the title there, it's district-wide fiber connectivity additions and structured cabling. Those fiber connectivity additions, I discussed that with all of you who were present at the time back in September of 2019 when we had a closed session around technology and just cybersecurity in the district. And I laid out some things and some goals that we had as a department for our district moving forward to make sure that we improve our cybersecurity posturing. And so that is directly attached to that work. You approved our upgrade of our SAN several months ago, which was a pretty large line item in the bond. But this one does come with a large price tag attached to it. I just want to make sure it's clear up front. This was not, as I shared in the closed session, this portion is not covered and was not scheduled to be covered in the 2020 bond. So if you're wondering how we're going to pay for it, we will do the same thing that we've done and that we've done in the past in the 2015 bond. We'll be strategic with our purchases. If you recall, when I came before you for the elementary Chromebook purchases, we showed you a budgeted amount that was much higher than what we actually spent. So we just try to be as strategic as we can with our purchases, leveraging things like E-rate and cooperative bids so that we're spending less than the budgeted amount to account for projects like this. And especially now that we're in this COVID environment, I foresee other things that I'm sure are going to pop up that we need to address from a technology perspective that we will also have to find the funds to deal with. So Lindsay, you want to go through we'll take it from here. I'll let you go from there.
Okay, thank you. As Dwight mentioned, we do have some sources, alternate sources for possible funding. The T4 bids, which as you see here, the network equipment, there's structured cabling and district-wide fiber, we all submitted for E-rate funding. So this is government funding, would be a possible partial funding source if awarded. So we submitted for the district-wide fiber. We have multiple bids, one self-provision fiber. So in this instance, the district would actually own the fiber and maintain it. And then 5 bids for transport services. And so in this sense, you would just be leasing the fiber from, a large internet vendor. We did do some post bids. I think we are still seeing if there are a few others that were out there and checking references on these as well. So the estimated project cost for this one, like Dwight said, is kind of a large figure. It's 1.4 million. We do foresee savings. We already have encumbered some savings, and we foresee some savings in the future as well. Another category for this bid is structured cabling. And if you recall, when Scott was talking about his bids, there are areas in the district such as Seaholm, which are being renovated, and take the counseling area. All of the structured cabling, the data drops that you would connect from the computer to the wall, those are going to have to be redone. So that's kind of where this is helping, going hand in hand with all the construction areas. This isn't a district-wide thing, it's just to go with the construction and renovation. We had 2 bids that came in. We did post bids with both bidders. And once again, we're still checking references. For the structured cabling, and then along with the E-rate bid, there's a couple different categories, and you have the ability to go out for network equipment to get E-rate funding. And the E-rate consultant from the district put out a bid for some network equipment that's necessary just for the renovations and the additions, the additional cameras. So these items are all going to be paid through the contingency budget, was kind of earmarked for that construction cost, technology / construction cost. And so we have a budget of 414,300 something.
Oh, sorry, Lindsay.
That's okay.
Did you all have any questions about any of those items?
I have a question.
Yes.
So for the lay person, is this similar to me calling AT&T and asking them to come lay new fiber in my backyard for my connection, or is it more complicated than that?
To the lay person, probably very similar. I'll say similar, yes.
Okay, all right. So this is going to make our systems run faster and better, hopefully, correct?
That is a portion of it, yes. It's a much more detailed story than that, Amy. Quite honestly, just to be totally transparent, this fiber addition that we're making is not necessarily going to improve our connectivity in any way. We have a very, very robust and fast network as it stands. I would ask that the board is willing to engage me in an additional closed session to rehash the details of what this will support specifically and why it's being put in place. I would prefer not to release those details publicly if we don't have to.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dwight. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Okay, trustees, anything under the other agenda item? No? Okay, so for the community, we do have midwinter break all of next week. So therefore, our regular meeting is scheduled for the following Tuesday, which is Tuesday, February 23rd, 7 p.m. via Zoom / YouTube. Dr. Heitz, anything before we adjourn?
Nope, ready to go.
Okay. All right, trustees, thank you. Thanks, Central Leadership, and everyone have